Hello, hello, and welcome to today's episode of the Be Free podcast, or you may be watching this on YouTube. Today I have a man. Ken, I'm just trying to think if you're the first man that I have interviewed on the podcast. Are you? Or maybe Stuart, my husband. Interesting.
One for the start.
Yeah, so we've got Ken with us today. Ken has a huge range of modalities that he uses to support his clients. I actually met Ken, interestingly, through a miscarriage charity. Ken was doing some work with a miscarriage charity, and I was doing some work with a miscarriage charity, and we both kind of connected via that. And then I've also been on Ken's podcast, so Ken is also a podcaster, so you can go and check out his podcast. I'll pop the links in the show notes as well. But yeah, I really wanted to have this conversation with Ken because, one, it's not often to find men in this typical therapeutic healing role. But two, Ken has also done some training with regards to shamanism. And I really wanted to bring that to the podcast and have a conversation about that. And yeah, I find it also fascinating. So I'm very, very excited to get this conversation going. So good morning, Ken. How are you? Do you want to tell us a little bit about who you are?
Thank you, Susie. And yes, good morning to you and everybody else who is listening. Yeah, who am I? Well, that's a good question. My name's Ken Morton, and I class myself as a holistic therapist and a shamanic practitioner. So originally I was born and brought up in Fife, and I now live in the northeast of Scotland, and I have my business out of Peterhead. Mm-hmm. And it's been quite a journey for me throughout my life, and I've had many different career changes. I started off in hospitality and was a hotel manager, and then I changed to the wonderful world of finance, and credit control, and now I'm a holistic therapist.
Wow, do you know this? I've done credit control as well. Who knew?
Yeah. High five.
Yeah, don't know about high-fiving that role, but yeah, no. Brilliant. No. Amazing. So yeah, I think like next week's podcast actually is all about change and identity. So it's great that you've shared that kind of diverse roles that you've been in. And I love the way that you kind of combine this multitude of therapies now to support your clients in a beautiful, holistic way. But what took you from this world of finance and hospitality to becoming a healer?
Very good question, and it's one I could spend probably hours giving you a proper explanation, but I'll try and keep it brief. So really, what I believe was that the catalyst was death. Death of myself, and also death of my parents. That was a main part of my life, where I had two parents pass away quite close together, and that kind of changed a lot of things for me. It changed the way I think, and I began to question who I was, what's the nature of life, so many random questions that I never really paid much attention to. So that started me on a journey, and I had this idea that I wanted to create a concept where one could be fixed under one roof. You might have a relationship with a counsellor, you might have a relationship with a massage therapist, and another relationship with somebody else. And I thought I wanted to have one person, one relationship, and myself do everything. So that's what I set out to do. So I learned complementary therapies. First of all, I studied that in Elgin, and then I went on to do counselling and then shamanic practitioner. So I've kind of managed all the four aspects of what makes ourselves up, I believe, which is physical, emotional, spiritual, and psychological. So it's been quite a journey, and it's only been 7 years. I've managed to do all that in. So and there's plenty more to come.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's like the beginning, isn't it? I'm thinking about that today. I think I'm probably about 7 years as well. It's quite interesting. And you were saying there, kind of random questions. They're not random questions, are they? Huge questions, like, the death of yourself and, what am I here to do? Who am I? And all of those things. I think they're big questions that people can really relate to when there's huge life change. And honestly, like it's so interesting because as I said, next week's podcast literally is having this conversation. We should have been on it together. But it really it's big things that happen in people's lives that often trigger these changes. Or you mentioned kind of the death of yourself. And I noticed on your website, you'd said there, this teacher helped me replace lost parts of me that I did not know were missing and put me back together. I felt fit enough to continue with life and realized that I had a gift that had been dormant for all my life. The gift I had was my intuition. And I wondered if you could just explain a little bit about what you meant by those lost parts of you, and then also why intuition is important.
Okay, yeah, that's a great question. I think I'll start off in reverse. So intuition, I always knew I was different from other people. I always had this ability just to kind of know, and just, I don't know, just this feeling that I just knew what was going to happen. And people often used to say to me when I was younger, "Are you psychic?" I was like, "No, I'm not psychic. Obviously, I've got this ability just to know." I never quite understood it. I never quite related it to intuition. So life happens as it does, and you go through life, and working and family, and that became more the priority for me. And although this intuition was still there, it wasn't driving me. It wasn't the most prominent aspect in my life. And of course, as I just explained in the last question about my parents passing away, but when you have traumatic events like that, you can either go, I feel, two ways. You can descend or you can ascend. And I found that I just had this ability just to work my way through that. It was very difficult, but often when we lose soul parts, it's through an element of trauma happens within our life. I often use the example of it if you're in a car crash and just before the moment of impact, your soul temporarily leaves your body, just as a protection mechanism. And then the impact happens. And then afterwards, the soul parts that in your soul that had left your body often return to the body after the impact, and often they don't. And sometimes only part of them return. And that's usually an effect, the effects of trauma. So because we can't see it, can we? So so lost soul parts. For me, when I went through that traumatic event of losing my parents, I felt that parts of me were lost, but that also enabled other parts of me to come to the fore, such as my intuition. And then as I got through the trauma and dealt with it in my own way, then things started to realign for me. And this is the new direction that I found myself going into, the holistics and helping others. And that's where my passion really lies.
Yeah, I think that's really fascinating. There's a lot there's a greater awareness now around trauma, isn't there? Would you say, and kind of the effects of it, especially right now? I don't know if it's just because of the circles we're in, or I hope that other people out there are seeing that things that we maybe deem that have happened in the past that we might have dealt with, as you mentioned, actually, there may be parts of you leave at that point, or those parts of that trauma stored within you still that need to be processed. I think trauma is a really fascinating, very misunderstood thing, to explore. It's something that I'm working through right now, aspects of trauma, like, sometimes really small trauma and some big trauma.
That's what I'm just going to add there, is that everybody experiences trauma in a different way. And it can be as big as such as a car crash I mentioned there, or moving house, or moving relationships, or it can be something as simple as somebody saying something hurtful to you.
Yeah.
And that can be a traumatic experience, maybe an everyday conversation at work, which escalates into maybe an argument or disagreement, then that can have a traumatic effect on you. And regardless of how big or small it is, you still need to process the feelings that you experience throughout that traumatic event. And if those, from my view, is if those feelings aren't dealt with and they aren't processed, then they'll build up within the body and it can often manifest physically as pain, which is why people a lot of experience so much physical pain and don't often understand why.
Yeah.
So it's having that link to maybe trauma is a possible link to physical pain.
Absolutely. And I 100% agree with that from my past of anxiety and depression and things like that previously, how that had kind of manifested itself in this physical form. And again, during this process of healing again, however, a decade later, looking at those aspects of how that has manifested.
And we're not taught how to do this adult stuff, are we? Because when we're at school, that isn't taught to us. It's not in the current curriculum. So when you become an adult, or when you start going through puberty and experiencing different feelings and emotions, and not knowing really how to deal with them, then that carries on into your adult life until you do deal with them and you do resolve them. And when you do, then as an adult, you begin to realize how much of a hold that it may have had within your life.
Yeah.
And having to suddenly release that can be such a pivotal moment in someone's life when they've held that for so long. And releasing it as an adult, you feel so much better, lighter, and you're able to achieve a lot more just by releasing a bit of emotions and feelings. And yeah, it's amazing that just how much that has a hold on you.
Yeah, absolutely. I've just I'm kind of really fascinated just now with beliefs and beliefs coding. I'm kind of looking into all these things right now, and these beliefs that we form about ourselves, about the world, about other people from such a young age, how they control and affect us into adulthood, as you say, events, beliefs, all it's mind-blowing, isn't it? But the other thing that's mind-blowing from this lovely man from Fife, was it Fife you said?
Yes, yeah.
Is that you went on to study shamanism. And that to me is looking, it's so, I don't know, it just blew my mind, when you think about kind of shamanism and the indigenous cultures and those kind of things, and then here you've gone from the roles that you had before to suddenly being taken down this path to discover shamanism and bringing that into our society, our Western culture, those kind of things. So do you want to tell me a bit about how you came into this journey of shamanism?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's one thing about everything that I do is shamanism. It's the most passionate that I am about any of the modalities that I do. I felt it really was a calling for me. And I know that kind of sounds a bit new agey, mystical, but that's just kind of how it happened. So I'm not going to lie, as they say. I was learning about energy, and I'd done courses in Reiki, and I knew that energy played such a big part in our lives. And I began to realize that there's this word called shamanism or shamanism. And people say shamanism, it's like tomato.
Yeah.
So it means the same thing. And that was the first thing I thought, well, are they two different things? But no, that it's the same word, but it means exactly the same. It's just the way that people say it. So that was the first question that I had to answer. And then as I kind of got into researching a bit more about what it was, I found myself falling down a rabbit hole.
Yeah, I bet.
And then this whole world opened up in front of me. And it was like, wow, I didn't really realize this existed here. And there's so many different paths you can take. So what is it? The big question. Well, it's really means a seer, one who sees in the dark, one who sees things that others can't see. So that's kind of, I think, why it has that mystical appeal a lot to people, as well as the fact that it's been practiced by indigenous culture for so long throughout the whole world, not just one area of the world. So when I began to unravel the pieces, I began to piece together my intuition that I had, and my intuition developed further. And then I began to realize that I could actually see energy as well as feel it. And I went on this journey, and I went to Peru, and I went to the Amazon jungle, into the indigenous tribe, the Shipibo. And they're a group of people that live in the Amazon jungle and completely live without any external influences. So that they get their medicine from the Amazon, they get their construction from the Amazon, their the way that they live, their food, everything comes from the trees and the plants. And it really blew my mind how they can be so self-sustainable like that and not require any outside assistance. So, and that really immersed me deeper. And then when I came back, I had this passion for flowers and trees and how they can help us as humans. So I looked at the plant medicine a lot, and then that took me down the next part of the route, which was, well, why don't I just become a shamanic practitioner? Because I found myself getting so passionate about it. And so that's what I did. So I studied for 2 years. And I got my qualification afterwards, and that's kind of what I'm doing now. I'm teaching what I've known throughout my studies and my previous lifetime as I would say as hospitality and credit control. All that has a great influence on how I deal with people, and I'm using that as well as my skills from complementary therapies, counselling, using my intuition, and using all that into my shamanic healings that I do. So it's been a wonderful journey, and it's still ongoing.
Absolutely fascinating. And I think, you know, the shamanic approach is this holistic view, and you've got all these incredible tools to support the person as a whole, which I think is so important, because, you know, you mentioned kind of fragmentation earlier, and, you know, we can treat the mind for one thing, and we can treat the body for one thing, and we can treat the, you know, the emotional part for another. But unless you're pulling all that together, then it can become quite fragmented, I guess.
And I often feel that, you know, when, you know, in the shamanistic view of things, you know, shamans just see energy. They don't see labels like we have. You know, you've got a label for OCD, you've got a label for MS, you've got a label for this. These are all medical terminology that's just been attached to the feelings and the symptoms that you're experiencing. From a shaman point of view, we see energy. So there's maybe a build-up of energy in the knee, and that's about clearing that energy or moving that energy about the body so the body flows better. And that's all it is. It's very simple. It's just energy. Everything's energy. We are energetic beings. And often in society, we're not looked at in that sort of way. We're not. We're often told not to look into the energy side of things, because that's just mumbo jumbo, you know. But if you can see energy, like I say, I can do. You know, you can move things about in the body, and that can create such a change internally for someone that you can't explain it in normal medical terms. So that's kind of a lot of the reason why it's misbelieved, because you can't prove it. You know, you can't scientifically prove it, because energy is just energy. But many people have proved what energy is before, in terms of the physical body, but also in terms of how energy can power the world, not just, you know, through modern means, through electricity. You know, everything's energy, and we react to energy.
Yeah.
Totally.
So when you're going about your kind of day-to-day life, can you like turn your inner shaman on and off? Or, you know, like you see this sometimes with people who are psychic, and I've had this before myself, where sometimes you kind of like you haven't kind of switched it off fully and stuff comes through for me. Or so like when you're going about your day-to-day life, do you have to be like totally connected to someone to tap into what's going on for them, or can you pick up things as you're going through your day?
Yeah, I kind of look at it as a sort of connection which kind of can go off and on, simple as that. But also there's a middle ground as well. There's like a half on and a half off, where I think for my daily life, that's where I am. I'm in the half bracket, and there's times when I can switch off completely, which is quite good, because you know, it can be a lot of mental strain. And then when it's needed, I'll switch it on. But I tend to reside within the middle bracket. So if I'm going about my daily business, if I'm, for example, doing a task, driving the car, then I'm looking ahead of me, obviously, and I'm seeing what's coming, and I'm using my intuition sometimes, and it'll warn me if there's something ahead or something is about to happen. And it's just like that knowing, like I said, I don't know how, it's just there. And I think, I say I don't know how, I kind of know roughly. It's having that connection facilitates that that knowing. But yeah, so it's a middle ground, I would say. But it's good to have that ability to go between the three settings, I think, because if you're on one, it would be quite a draining. If you're all in the other, then you wouldn't be able to connect, and it's just having that balance. Yeah.
Cool. I also love like the world of shamanism and that connection to nature and listening to nature and working with nature and the cycles of nature. I feel very, very drawn. I do work a lot with plants and flower essences and oils and food as medicine and all these kind of the energetics of those kind of things as well. So I absolutely love that. You have 2 events coming up, which are introductions to shamanism for anybody who is looking to kind of look into that a bit more. Do you want to speak a little bit about them, and then maybe give an example of how any listeners or watchers might bring some form of shamanic principles into their life? Because it's like a way of living, isn't it? It's like your Reiki as well. It's like a way of being, or Buddhism, or it's like a way of life, isn't it?
It is, and that's the thing that I didn't fully realize, but it was a nice integration that I had, because I felt that everything was kind of lined for me, and it was just following that path. And I felt that your mind develops the more you know, and I think that's what it was for me. The more I started to know, the more I started to develop the way I was living my life. And looking back to 20 years ago, it's a complete change, completely opposite. But yes, I have got 2 events, 3rd of July or 7th of August. Or do you want me to mention the dates and things later?
No, that's fine. On you go. Yeah, go right away.
Shameless little plug there.
No, definitely go for it. Tell people about it.
Yeah, how really these practices can help us in society right now. I mean, I would say it's kind of like a staged process, like it was for me. I think the important thing to remember as well, that you know, we live in a 5-sense reality. So if you can't taste it, smell it, see it, hear it, or feel it, then it doesn't exist. And a lot of people are kind of, they maybe have 3 of those senses that they're using to their full ability. Some may be less than that, but to use the all 5 senses is to the most acute part. Is the first stage of the process, because without that, then you can't really understand who you are and connect to yourself. So in other words, it's also connecting with yourself, And when I say that, it's, for example, if you're walking in the street, you're using all your five senses. A lot of the time, they're just on autopilot. So you just carry on walking along the pavement, go to work. And although everything's happening around you, you're not fully taking it in. But to stop and just listen, first of all, to the sounds you're hearing, the birds, it could be somebody closing a window, cars going by, roadworks, just counting out how many things you can hear. Because there's so many different sounds out there, but we just take them for granted. And smells, you might walk past a bush or a tree. Somebody might be walking past with salt and vinegar on their chips. Oh, you smell the vinegar. It's smelling everything. So it's being really present and just getting absorbed by the senses. And seeing everything, just looking around, because we often just walk around with our eyes closed, don't we? Just on autopilot, and just seeing what's around and looking up. And I often find this quite fascinating, looking up. If you're in a city, you never really look higher than your eye line. So if you look up, the wonders of architecture that you see and the beauty in buildings that you don't normally notice. So there's so much around us that we don't really notice. So the first stage is really getting to really get your senses on full point, first of all. And then, like I said, connecting with your body, connecting with yourself, and going to every part of your body and really feeling what it feels like in your knee. And it's getting your consciousness down to certain areas of the body and just doing like a body scan. What parts of me aren't working right? Why do I think they're not working right? And what am I doing that's causing the pain? Is it something I'm eating? Is it something I'm doing, exercise or whatever? So it's really just getting the five senses is the first stage, and really developing them to such a high level that you're able to just understand a lot more and I think take in a lot more information. And by doing that, you're kind of training your brain to open a lot more to receive. Because when you're dealing a lot with the spirit within shamanism, it's about connecting, and the more you can connect with yourself, the better it is, because it's a much better flowing connection. And it's not being limited just by these five senses.
Oh, wow. This is, so cool. So what dates did you say they were again? This podcast is going out on the 30th. So I believe the first one's quite soon after this. So if you're listening to this and the date comes out and this interests you, the link's there. So what dates is it again, Ken?
So it's Sunday, the 3rd of July and Sunday, 7th of August.
Awesome. And these are taking place at?
It's at the Calm Space Yurt, which is near Auchnagat in Aberdeenshire. And it's 10 till 4, and we've got lunch included, a free shamanic gift, and also a cozy fire ceremony.
Wow, sounds amazing. And I have been there myself. It's such a stunning place, so lovely and perfect venue for being in nature and close to nature and all of those things. Amazing. So you have all these incredible tools, but kind of day to day, what do you use to support your own mental, physical, emotional health?
It's quite a simple one. Walking. Walking is great because you can go where you want. I often like to go for a walk in the woods or the forest and just sit there and just, like I said, use all my senses, listen to the birds, and think, are they singing? Are they how are they communicating to each other, and trying to understand things from a human perspective. I love going for a walk in the forest, and also I find for me it is not one for everybody, but silence as well. There's so much noise pollution out there that when I'm in the city, it gets too suffocating for me. And I like to move out and just experience the silence and the calmness of the silence, because that helps to really just change your mindset. There's a great, a lot of people might have heard of Bruce Lipton, who's the author of many books, one of which, Biology of Belief. And he says that, you know, if there's any way that you're struggling in life, if you can change the state of your mind, then your cells also change as well. So if you change your direction and go out to, for example, have a walk in the countryside, you know how that makes you feel. It feels good. So your cells react accordingly. So that promotes a healthy body internally as well. So yeah, walking's great for me. That's what I do most.
I love asking people that question, because I think it can be quite inspiring for people that are listening or watching, just to have a little think about, like, well, yeah, I could walk. I could go for a walk. Like, why did I not think about that? You know, and just use that time for that connection. And I think silence as well, as you mentioned, some people kind of struggle with that. And I think that's a practice. It takes practice. I see that a lot with meditation clients, that can be a real big, I've taught silent classes before, whereby we're not allowed to talk from the moment, you know, you come in, you're not allowed to talk, and kind of do that. And people find it really uncomfortable to begin with. But then once you settle into that, it can be such a beautiful, nurturing space to be in, if you allow yourself.
As I mentioned before, we all need to process things that are going on in our head. And if we can't process them in a noisy environment, then the only way to process them is in a quiet environment. And we often don't get that in our lives, in our busy lives, where we're, you know, we've got kids to take to school and then pick them up, and then we've got shopping to do, housework, husband and wife, and, you know, we've got to go out this, calm down. You know, just have a moment just to think to yourself and just stop thinking if you can. I know it's very difficult, because there's a lot of thoughts that come into our heads, but it's just to try and even just give yourself 5 minutes just to sit and stop, because that's so important, and that just might just happen to give you a little bit of a reset.
Yeah, definitely. Cool. So I ask everybody this question that comes on, but what is it that makes you feel free, Ken?
Yeah, I love this. It's a great question as well. Great questions you've got, Susie. Challenging ones.
Thanks. I used to be a recruiter for a living as well, so I'm used to asking difficult questions.
Good. So I'll receive well. I would say for me to be free, it's clearing the clutter. Is what I would say. Not just from your brain, but your environment.
Yeah.
You know, if you sit at home in your front room and you look out and you might think, oh, what a mess this place is in. And that kind of is a reflection of you internally. So if the first thing I always clear the clutter. So it's about adopting that minimalist attitude. It may not have to be forever, but if in order to help you in that moment in time, it's clearing stuff away. And even if it's just into another room and shut the door. But sometimes when you sit in your front room, and if it's quite untidy and messy, then that's the way you're going to feel inside. And you're not able to really concentrate on things. The focus might go, because your mind's always like stimulated. So try and calm the mind, just clear the clutter, and that really helps me to be free, just to not see anything.
Awesome. Yeah, that's so helpful. I love decluttering. I went through a decluttering process, like with a professional declutterer. I think that's definitely something that gives me a lot of clarity as well. And space, it feels more spacious, doesn't it? You know? Yeah,
it does. And it allows the ability, I think, for your mind to expand more, because there's not so much clutter to fill it with. And you're able to receive a lot more. And I as well, personally, for me, it helps me to process things in my head better, because I'm not always distracted.
I think like you obviously are very into the energetics of things as well, and the energy of having that clear space or shifting things about, clearing energy, not allowing stagnant energy in spaces. I'm fascinated by feng shui. I like, love it all.
It shapes as well. I have to mention shapes. You know, it shapes and angles. You know, if there's rounded walls, then things flow better. Whereas if it's like an acute angle, 90 degrees angle, it can feel a bit sort of harsh.
Yeah.
It's a personal thing, and the way that you look at shapes and angles, and having been able to have rounder tables, for example, or a rounder kitchen unit. They're not always made like that, but if you can try and minimize it to a certain degree, I think that all helps in the house, you know, immediately, just because that's where you spend a lot of your time. And being able to just help yourself in little ways like that can have such a, I think, a beneficial effect on you.
Yeah. Cool. Which brings me nicely on to as well, actually, my Be Free community, because within there, we do actually have a decluttering masterclass that was taught to us a number of months ago by a lady called Rosie Barron from Tidy Coo. And she delivered an incredible masterclass for us, which you can access. You can access any of the old masterclasses within the community when you join. You don't just get that month's, you get access to everything that's happened before. So there's a whole month's worth of there's meditation classes, that masterclass and things, all to do with simplifying your life and just making things, as Ken said there, just flow a bit easier, you know, not feeling so stuck. So if anybody wants to check that out, I'll pop the link to the community below. You can come join me there. But if people want to connect with you further, Ken, what's the best way for people to connect with you?
Well, the easiest way is to head to my website, which is kmtherapy.org.uk, and you'll find all my links to my social media and whatnot there. So that's the easiest way.
Perfect. Amazing. So I will pop Ken's links below, and also how to contact him with regards to the introduction to shamanism day. You can go check those out. Is there anything else you would like to add, Ken, just before we jump off?
I don't think so. I mean, we've covered quite a lot there. Yeah. Loads of different little topics, and these are just my brief answers. You know, I could spend a lot more time on each question, but I know we're limited for time. But if people want to come along to more of my events, then I'll have a lot more time with me.
Yeah, definitely. So yeah, reach out to Ken if anything we've touched on speaks to you. Go check out his website. You can book directly with him via the website as well. If anything I've mentioned as well comes up, feel free to reach out to me, tag us, share us, all those good things. Or if you've got any friends that you think might be interested as well, then do pass it on. Share the love, share the wisdom. And cool. So I will look forward to catching up with you soon, Ken.
Yeah, thank you for having me on. Very kind of you.
Not at all, not at all. And yeah, I look forward to our next conversation and see where it may lead.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Susie.
Take care. Bye.
Bye.